Namaste all, Jigs here from Phoenix Consulting and Training Worldwide, speaking to you today from Kathmandu, Nepal. Well, today I'd like to talk to you about using a design tool during your project plan creation process, one that will help you collaborate with your team and partners, all outside of MS Project. In addition, we will cover a few ideas on how to better meet your funder or donor's expectations, and how to avoid rework later on down the road due to project design flaws. Well, let's get started. So in the exercise that follows, I'm going to 1. Show you a tool that will help you collaborate with your team and partners during the initial project design. 2. Demonstrate how you can put the point of design up front before you begin your actual scheduling in MS Project. Yet everything that we do can be later reused inside of MS Project. And 3, hopefully convince you that this will reduce the number of problems that can crop up during project implementation due to an uncollaborated, poorly designed project. Ha! And as I like to say, collaborate first, design early, and then relax. Here we will use a real-life project from the DRC and a project aimed at replacing cocoa plantations with food crops called No Cafe X. No Cafe X is typical of the projects that I mostly work on these days. International development in messed up places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Nepal, other places, but nonetheless full of real growth opportunity. Here is the original thinking that was presented as a project plan during proposal submittal in response to an RFP, request for proposal. This is typical in the world that I live in, where plans often start out as a generalized task list in a questionable order and represented on a timeline using colored boxes in a Word or an Excel table. Sometimes these inadequate representations are actually used during project implementation. But most often, someone has the foresight to rework this initial plan in either Excel or MS Project. If they choose Excel, then there are more colored boxes, and the project manager's job then becomes one of moving colored boxes around for the entire life of the project. Yuck. But in cases where a PM knows MS Project, we see a much better result even if the PM just takes the task list as is and inputs that into a draft schedule. The problem then becomes one of how to collaborate and confirm the design of the schedule before going too far down the road. Farmers struggle with Gantt chart reviews during meetings, and timelines generated from MS Project may be too simplistic to discuss. So what can we do to improve the initial design process of any project plan? In the words of singer-songwriter Dan Byrne, go out and buy something. Seriously, we can begin by creating a real-life draft plan as we are preparing our proposals, can't we? That will at least set expectations correctly and avoid complaints later that we did not do what we were paid oh so much to do. We can also use a visual collaboration tool, such as MindJet's Mind Manager, a mind mapping tool, during our first collaborative meetings with the team and with our partners, to get things close to right up front. And in this way, we can get a loose confirmation with all involved before we submit our proposal and well ahead of project implementation. As I like to say, conceive, collaborate, then confirm. So let's look at 2 ways we can go about scheduling the work needed for the No CAFX project. One way, using just MS Project and a task list as a work breakdown structure, and another way is using MindJet with some of its great collaboration features, followed by an export to MS Project for more refined scheduling later. After we do that, you can be the judge on which way is better. Well, let's first open up a task list that we could have extracted from any Office file, and then paste that into a new Microsoft project plan. Now let's pretend we're going to try and use some version of this during our first collaborative meeting with other team members and partners. The difficulty, of course, is how to mold this raw task list into a valid schedule with input from everyone in the room. Well, let's do some of that molding ourselves, just as you might if our imaginary collaboration were happening right now. First, there is a call for proper phases in the plan. Can we have a beginning, middle, and end, please? Now a team leader asks, why is there a line item with no colored boxes labeled Future? Great questions. Things are really starting to take shape now. Then someone asks for details on the campaign plan. At this point, a farmer asks, what do all those connected lines mean, connecting all those colored boxes? And you realize you're not only being boring, but you might be losing a few people as well. To add insult to injury, the boss asks, how are we going to represent 2 growing seasons? There are 2, aren't there? And why are we organized by crop and not by activity? Great questions. So let's fix that up for the boss. Durations can even be discussed and added right during the meeting. Why not? Now that we have an agreed upon structure for the plan, the team can then brainstorm responsibilities and assign resources at a very high level. And so on and so forth, for as much as the collaborating group can stand. So that's how the meeting might go, going into as much detail as necessary at a high level, long enough to satisfy any donor or funder while they are evaluating your proposal for the project, and providing enough detail that will help task leaders once your proposal is approved and work needs to start. Okay, now let's open up Mind Manager version 15 and pretend we are holding that same collaborative meeting with the team, but instead of using Microsoft Project as the driving tool, we use a mind map instead. So we start by just rearranging our original task list as before, getting input from the team as we go along, and drag items around, place them here, place them there. Very easy. Add new items, just hit enter. Quick and simple. You can see we are not fumbling around with keystrokes and working within a linear list anymore. We are free to easily add and subtract items, drag them anywhere in the structure, rename them, iconize them, do all sorts of colorize them. The list of options goes on. We can focus in on just a single branch, so for large maps we don't have to go blind, and everyone in the back of the room can see as well. So, we can also annotate tasks here in Mind Manager very easily by using the task pane, selecting on a task, for example, adding resources. Basically, you just click on an item and add the resource in. Easy peasy. And just as in Microsoft Project, it saves your list of resources for easy selection. So we'll just do a few more of those to give you an example. And since you're sitting there with the whole group of people, you can get a really good idea of who's working on what with your whole team there, and perhaps your partners as well in your collaborative meeting. And then for durations, you can also enter in durations, weeks, months, whatever, and it just pops it in there, associating it with that list item. So we'll do a few more of these, give you an idea of how simple that is. It's pretty much like Microsoft Project, yeah? And there are other options, priority and progress, never use them. We'll do that in Microsoft Project. Now I've seen a few PMs go ahead after collaboration and just use this map to track the project. Forget about MS Project, I'll just stay here and work, they say. Well, I don't recommend that at all. In fact, going much further than we have gone now in this map is just silly in my opinion, as Microsoft Project is a much better tool for actually tracking costs, people, and tasks. So don't do that here. Do that in Microsoft Project. And as you'll see, we're getting, when we're done, we'll just export all the work we've done here, and it creates a Microsoft project plan anyway. But for a brainstorming and review tool, Mind Manager wins hands down. Look at this. You can send the map for review and get comments back as you do with any Office file. I just can't believe Microsoft Project has not implemented this feature yet. So in addition to reviews, here in Mind Manager, we can annotate line items with comments, and those comments are actually preserved as notes in Microsoft Project. That's pretty handy. Back to our imaginary collaborative meeting, we have a cool feature here to help you get more out of the meeting.
MindJet's brainstorming functionality is under the advanced ribbon under brainstorm. Pops the right hand side of the screen up, filled with all kinds of brainstorming activities. For example, defining challenges, generating ideas, and then categorizing and refining the input that you're gathering and popping that into the map so that everyone can see it on the screen. This is kind of cool, and you can even play games, I guess, here with challenge cards. Yeah, so there's lots of fun stuff that you can play with here. Predefined challenges. How can we incorporate an element of gaming into our product? Well, I don't know. Is there any way that we can incorporate gaming into M&E? You can throw out that question and then generate some ideas. And let me see, what about drones? Is there any way that monitoring M&E of farm crops can incorporate drones? I don't know. I sure would like to see that happen. And then we can categorize these things and facilitate a discussion on that crazy thought. And so there's a question, there's an idea, and we can talk about doing it. Investigate, okay. And yeah, pros and cons. Why not? What are the pros and cons of flying drones over farm fields? So you get the picture. It's basically used in the collaborative environment, and you wouldn't necessarily export this out to Microsoft Project, although some of these branches on the tree might be something that turns into an activity which you would preserve. So it's very useful in that way. I recommend trying it out.
Now, after the meeting winds down and adjourns, with everyone feeling good about the design, the plan owner simply exports the design directly into MS Project. Let me show you how that's done.
So you've just completed this great collaborative meeting between your partners and your team, and you've created this structure for your project that represents reality, and you've even collected resource names and durations for the tasks that you have in your structure, and now you're ready to get this into Microsoft Project in one or two clicks so that you can do the hardcore scheduling. And then tracking and all the other wonderful things that you can do in Microsoft Project. Well, great. You can either just do a straight export of what you got without going any further, or then in that way you would get a flat list of everything, or you can add your dependencies, your links here in MindJet. It's up to you, and you'll have to try it and see which one you prefer. The representation of dependent links, for example, finish to start, start to start, etc., are these little red arrows that you'll see here between tasks. Why don't we just link a few, and then you'll get an idea of whether you'd like to do it here or in Microsoft Project. So I've left some down at the bottom. There's no relationship lines, and that's what they call them in MindJet, relationships, between this last set of work that needs to be done. So go over to our task pane, and if we select the first one and select the second one, we can see we're allowed to add a dependency between those two tasks. If nothing is selected, or just one is selected, the dependency drop down is grayed out. So we'll do that. We'll make that finish to start. And it's up to you to figure out what type of dependency it is. In this case, they're all finish to starts. Okay. So that's all you have to do. And when this project is exported, as you'll see in a moment, the linking should be represented in the Microsoft Project Gantt chart. Before you do the export, you'll want to make sure that you go back to the full view of your map, because if you do the export just showing one branch, you'll just export that branch. And simple enough, come over to File, Export, select Export Task Info to Microsoft Project, give it a location, and you're going to want to include the central topic. The central topic is actually the name of the title of your project. Don't have to worry about the rest. And we'll open that up, see the results. Voila. So it looks pretty good. We have our phases that we started out making, and within the phases We have a subphase or subset. That all looks good. We have our milestones that we set. And we have our 2 growing seasons. Milestones. Resources are there. Links are there. Durations are there. It all looks pretty good, huh? And here's that last little bit that we did. Great. So that's pretty much it. Now you're ready to do all the other great stuff that you can do as a planner as far as scheduling goes, starting the project, tracking it, progress, all that other good stuff. Enjoy.
So now that you've seen both ways to go about getting to the same place, which is a sane plan that you've created early on during the development process, I suggest you try using your mind map during your next design cycle. You might be pleasantly surprised with the end result. So now that you have witnessed firsthand 2 ways of going about this, see if you agree with me here. No more submitting of colored boxes disguising as a project plan. Instead, we use a draft plan with a more precise schedule as agreed upon by the team and with our partners. And we can even include estimated costs and resourcing using these cool features found in MS Project. Since we have collaborated, the work breakdown is much more precise and organized to the potential reality of the job at hand. We've fixed some of our mistakes in the initial thinking, either coming from our donor or funder, or from an ill-informed proposal writer. We've involved the entire team early, which is always a good idea. And we are going to save on the cost of a case of Advil for our project managers and task leaders, and perhaps keep them from going crazy during the life of the project. Well, we still might need the Advil. Questions? Ha! I can't hear you. Well, that's it for me for now, but please feel free to write me for more info on this or anything else that my company does. I want to thank you for taking the time to attend this session, and let's also thank the many sponsors that made this event possible, even if half of them I've never even heard of before. I do look forward to finding out more about them, though. BMO. I like the sound of that.